I've got an amazing tutorial lined up for you guys today. We're going to make an advanced landscape material. Last week our landscape material was pretty basic and it looked like this, but this week we're going to make it look like this. We're going to be going over height blending and also how to combine height blending with angle blending to create some amazing results, so stick around. Alright, before we begin, there are a couple of things that we need to do. If you haven't yet watched the video from last week, make sure that you go back and watch that one. Here's the link to it. If you just jump into this week's video without seeing last week's, you may be lost in some parts because we're going to be building off of what we did last week. Alright, the next thing that we need to do is we need to download a couple of materials from Quixel Bridge. So let's jump over and do that. So here we are in Quixel Bridge, and last week we downloaded this layer rock cliff material and this snow material. And today we're going to be mixing in some dirt and some grass. And so the dirt we're going to be using here is called dry rocky ground 2x2M. And the grass that we're going to be using is called grass wild. So go ahead and grab those and download them. I'll put the link in the description. By now you should be familiar with my method for downloading and packing these textures into CR and NOH texture sets. If you're not, here's the link to how to do that. And also you should be familiar with my method for creating materials from the textures. If you're not familiar with that, I put a link to that right here. This is a process that you should become familiar with. If you want to use your own methods for creating materials, that's fine too, just as long as your result is a material function in Unreal. So if we jump back into Unreal, here's the landscape material that we created last week. We have our rock cliff material and our ground snow material, and we're blending between them using angle blending. Now I've gone ahead and brought in the new materials that we're going to use today. Here's our ground dirt, our grass wild, and our moist stone. Let's take a minute just to look at them individually so that you can see what settings I'm using. So here for ground dirt, if you want to use my values, they're right here, but of course you're welcome to use your own. Here's my material for grass wild and the values that I'm using for that. And here's our moist stone material. Now this is a material that we used in our previous tutorial when we were creating the handcrafted landscape. I'm going to use this for kind of a rocky version of grass, but like I said, you're also welcome to use whatever material feels right for you. Alright, so the first thing that I want to do is go over what our strategy is. What we want to do is create grass where our landscape is flat, and rock or cliff face where our landscape is steep or sloped. And then we'll blend between those two using our angle blending method that we learned last week. The other thing that we want to do is for our grass, we want to use this wild grass where we're low in the landscape, but we want to use this moist stone where we're higher up in elevation in our landscape. And the same thing with our sloped surfaces. Where we're higher up in elevation, we want to use our cliff, but where we're lower in elevation on the slopes, we want to use our dirt. And so the first thing that we need to know is how to make a height map. And so let's just move our material up here, and we'll start out by learning how to create a mask that determines height, or that's based on height. And so for that, we want a new node that I haven't talked about yet that's called Smooth Step. And what this node does is it takes a minimum and a maximum, and the result is a mask between 0 and 1, where 0 is the minimum and 1 is the maximum. And if we use the absolute world position as our output, or as our alpha, then we're able to get a mask that goes from 0 at the low point to 1 at the high point. So let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to grab a world position node. And by default, this is going to give us the world position after material changes. And I don't want that. I actually want it to be excluding material shader offsets. And to get our height value from the world position, we want the Z component. So I'm going to make a component mask. And instead of the R and G, I want the B. And so this is going to be the alpha of our smooth step. And now I need some height values. So what I can do is come back here to my landscape, and I can place down an object and see where that object is in the landscape. For example, I've got my player start item here. And if we jump over to the player start item, you can see here it is in my landscape. And I can come over here and look and see that my player start item is at negative 48,000, let's say. So if we want to blend between there and a different height, then I need to make a constant node. And I'm going to make it negative 48,000. And I'm going to make that my minimum. And then let's just make 0 my maximum. So with these values, I'm going to get a gradient between 0 and 1 that goes from negative 48,000 to 0. So let's just plug this into the color on our landscape and see what we get. So now you can see here where my player is, it's kind of dark on the terrain. But if we zoom out, you can see that the higher up we get, the brighter that value is. And if I come back to my material here, I'm just going to make this a little more obvious. Instead of 0 and negative 48,000, I'm going to make it negative 48,000 and maybe negative 47,000. So that's a little more obvious. You can see that right where the player is at negative 48,000 is our darkest value. And then at negative 47,000, it goes up to white. So I'm able to create a mask, and I can use this mask to blend between two different materials. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll take my smooth step value, and I'm going to copy this material layer blend custom. This is a node that we made in last week's tutorial. So I'm just going to wire it up really quick. What I want is my wild grass where it's low. So I'm going to wire that in here. And I want my moist stone where it's high. So let's wire that in here. And then instead of what we're doing here, I'm going to wire in the result of this blend. So I'm going to plug my height into my break material attributes, or my material into the attribute socket of my break material attributes, and my height into my landscape displacement down here. So now we're just going to move this out of the way for now. And now we're going to just take a look at the results of blending between my grass wild and my moist stone. And we need to make sure that we swap out our color because we were looking at our mask before, and now we're looking at our actual materials. Alright, so you can see that down here where my player start value is, I'm getting my grass material. And then further up, I'm getting my moist stone material. So that is a height blend. I can blend between my grass and my moist stone material based on the height of the landscape. And I'm using smooth step, and I've given smooth step the low value where I want the blend to start and the high value where I want the blend to end. So pretty cool. However, if we take a look here, what we've got here is a nice smooth transparent blend. And real materials don't really behave this way. Like there isn't a smooth gradient between grass and dirt. That doesn't really make sense. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to do a combination between this height value that we've just created and the height data that I'm getting from my stony ground material. So here's my, my moist stone material, and I've got a height coming out of here, and I can combine this height gradient that I've created with this height coming out of here using an overlay node. So I'm going to type overlay and grab a blend overlay node. And I'm going to plug my moist stone height value into the blend and my height gradient into the base. So let's see what this mask looks like. I'm just going to wire it into color here. So now you can see I still have kind of a smooth gradient, but I'm breaking it up with the height value that I'm getting from that moist stone material. Now if I want to break it up even more, I can up the contrast of this mask. So let's add a cheap contrast node in here. And I'm going to take the results of my blend overlay and wire them into contrast, and then give the contrast a constant value of 1. And let's wire that in and take a look at the results. Okay, cool. So now you can see that our smooth gradient is really nicely broken up, and it starts out just showing the highest elements of my moist stone material. And then as we move up the height gradient, pretty soon it fills in everything. Now you're welcome to tweak these values to get even more contrast if you want, but for now, this is what we're looking for. So I'm going to come back to my material here and set these values a little bit more in line with some values that I've measured previously. For my landscape, I'm going to set the minimum smooth step to -60,000. And I'm going to set the maximum smooth step to 0. And let me just clean up my nodes here just a little bit. And then I'm going to plug my cheap contrast here into the alpha vertex and alpha pixel blend values for my material layer blend node. And then we'll save this and take a look at our result. Okay, so now you can see that down here low, we're getting the nice smooth grass material. And then further up high in the mountains, we're getting the moist stone material. So grass isn't able to grow at higher altitudes very well, and so we're kind of simulating that using this material where we're blending from our moist stone material down to our nice grass material. All right, so that's how we're going to do our grass. And I'm just going to clean up the graph just a little bit here and organize things, and we're done. And the next thing that I want to look at is our cliff material. So we have our rock cliff, and at a high altitude we want rock cliff, but at a low altitude we want the ground dirt. So we can do this kind of similar to what we've done with the grass material. I'm just going to move the snow out of the way for a minute. So for dirt, we want the dirt where it's low, and we want the cliff where it's high, and we can blend between our dirt and our cliff based on this same mask. So if I take the result of my cheap contrast and wire it in here to this blend, now we can take the blended material here and plug it in, and the same thing with the blended height, plug it into our displacement node, and let's save it and take a look. So now where it's low, we have our dirt material, and where it's high, we have our nice cliff material. And that looks pretty cool. If we kind of come and zoom out here, you can see I've got cliffs where it's high, and I've got dirt where it's low. We can also come over here and take a look at what that's doing. Now, one problem with this is even where it's low, like over here, if I have a really steep cliff, I may still want to use that cliff material. And how can I do that? Well, I need to create a mask that is both a mix between the height and the angle blend. So that's what we're going to do next. So right now I've got my height mask here, but I also need an angle blend. So here's my MF angle blend node. And if we just take the result of this and we look at the base color here, you can see that it's black on the cliff and white on the bottom. And that's not what I need. I actually need to invert that. So I'm going to add a 1- node, which will invert my mask so that it's white on the slopes and black where it's flat. Okay, so you can see that my slope is white now, but my flat is not as dark as I need it to be, so we need to do a little bit of tweaking to our angle blend node here. Let's create a couple of constant values. For my pixel normal blend, I'm going to set this to a value of 0.25 to use a little bit more of the pixel normals than default. For the angle multiplier, I'm going to use a value of -0.3, and this adjusts the angle so that I'm only getting the cliff where the angle is really steep. And then I'm also going to add one more constant value here to adjust the sharpness of my mask, and I'm going to turn my sharpness up to 50. So let's take a look at the result of this. Okay, so now you can see that I have a nice mask that's only on the slopes, and it's nice and sharp. So it has this sharp blending line. And now I need to combine this angle or slope mask with this height mask. And I can just use an add for that. So it's pretty simple. I'm just going to take my pixel and my vertex values here with the 1-, and I'm going to add the result of my slope mask. So I'm going to put in an add node here and add this output with the result of my cheap contrast down here. And then I'm going to saturate it. This is really important because it makes sure that the values don't go higher than 1. And they will in some places because I'm using this add node. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the output of my vertex mask. All right, so I'm adding my height gradient mask here to my angle mask here. And now I can use that to blend between my dirt and my cliff. And what this is doing is at a low altitude, I have dirt, but I also have cliffs if the angle is steep enough. And then at a high altitude, I'll always get the cliffs. Okay, so here you can see that down at the low altitude, I've got dirt, except where it's steep, like on this cliff here. And then at a high altitude, I only have cliff. So you can see here there's this nice blend between dirt where it's low and then cliffs where it's high. Okay, so I've done my grass and I've done my rock, dirt, and cliffs. And now I need to blend between the two of these. So here's my dirt and cliffs, and here's my grass. And I need to take the results of this blend and blend it with the results of this blend. So I need to use another matte layer blend custom, and I'm going to wire my rock material in here as our base and my grass material in here as our top material. And then I'm going to wire this as our blended material, and then I'll connect my height down here to my displacement node. Great, and now all I need to do is create the mask to blend between these two. And the way that I'm gonna do that is just with an angle blend, because we want the rock where the angle is steep and the grass where the angle is shallow. So I'm just gonna copy this angle blend that I had from down here, and we'll plug it in and see what we get. Maybe before plugging it in, I'll tweak this value so that it's negative 0.4, and then maybe leave our sharpness instead of 50, maybe turn it down a little bit to 25. Okay, we've got a pretty good looking shader here. You can see that we've got our cliff material and we've got our grass material, and we're blending between those two based on our angle blend. And so now we've got a scene that's starting to come together pretty nicely. You can see that we've got grass down here where the elevation is low, and up high we've got our nice stone material. And then for the cliff faces, we have dirt on the sides, but where it gets steep enough, we have our cliff down here. And then at the high elevations, we have cliffs everywhere where it's steep. Pretty cool. There is one more tweak that I want to do. I want to create just a little bit better blending between these two different components. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back here where I've got these values here coming into my angle blend, and I'm going to lerp between a different set of values depending on my elevation. So I'll have one set of values here for blending if I'm using, or if I'm at a low elevation, and a different set if I'm at a high elevation. So I'm just going to duplicate these, and I'm going to add in a couple of linear interpolate nodes, and I'm going to wire these together. So if I'm at a low elevation, I want a pixel normal blend of 0.7. So blending between the dirt and the grass, I want to use a little bit more of the pixel normal. And then I also want this value here to be 0.47. And what I'm doing here is just tuning the relationship between the dirt and the grass at the different altitudes. Now, to blend between these values, I'm going to use this height mask that I created here. And what this is going to do is give me an independent value for tweaking the blend between the dirt and the grass at a low elevation, and the moist stone and the cliff at a higher elevation. It's just a little bit of polish. All right, so now you can see that my dirt and my cliff has a nice blend here. And my dirt and my grass, this is kind of why I was doing that polish, so that I can get a really soft, smooth blend between the dirt and the grass at a low elevation, but then a little bit harder blend between the cliffs and the moist stone at the higher elevations. All right, this is looking pretty cool, but we do have one last trick, and that is the snow. Hope you didn't forget about the snow. We still need to blend it in. So I'm just gonna move all of this back just a little bit. And here's our snow. We need to add one more matte layer blend custom, and we're going to blend between everything else as the base and the snow as the top material. And the blend mask that we're going to create for our snow is a little bit unique. Instead of a nice smooth blend, what we're going to do is the higher we are, the further down the cliff face angle the snow is going to go. So we have this angle blend node here, and I could just wire it directly in and put snow wherever the angle is flat, but that's going to stomp on my grass. So I only want the snow to show up at a higher elevation, but I want the snow to start at the lower elevations but be kind of patchy. And then as we go up the elevations, I want it to be thicker and thicker. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to take this angle multiplier, and depending on our elevation, we're going to increase that angle multiplier. So first I need to create a couple of constant values. For my pixel normal blend, I'm going to use a constant value of 0.15. And then for my angle multiplier, like I said, I'm going to lerp this value. And for my lerp, we're going to lerp between a constant value of negative 0.75 and 0. And we're going to base this value on how high up we are. So at a high altitude, the blend is going to come way down the side of the angle, but at a low altitude, it's going to be pushed way up to the top. And for our angle sharpness, I'm just going to use a constant value of 50. And so the last thing that we need to do for our snow mask is create our height gradient. And so I'm just going to copy this value here and paste it down here. And this time we're going to use different values in the min and the max. For the minimum, I'm going to use negative 75,000. And for the maximum, I'm going to use 50,000. All right, so I'm going to plug this in. And so we're using our height to blend between these two different angle values. So as we get higher and higher, the snow creeps lower and lower down the angle. So before we take a look at our final material, I just want to plug this into our base color so that we can take a look and see what that mask looks like. Okay, so here you can see at the very top of this peak up here, we're getting snow even on steep slopes. But then as we come down, the snow kind of recedes and it only shows up in flat areas like this path. And then as we come down even lower, it just goes away completely. So at our high altitudes, we're getting snow pulled down all the way to the steep slopes. And then at low altitude, the angle is reduced and it's only allowed to show up on flat areas. So we get less and less snow as the angle is pushed higher and higher. So pretty cool technique. So let's switch back to our material again, and we'll go ahead and wire everything up and take a look at our final result. So here we're blending between our rock and our dirt based on a combination of angle and our height. Here we're blending between our grass and our stone based on our height with a little bit of material height overlaid on top. And then here we're blending between our master grass or our master cliff material and our master grass material based on the angle blend. And then finally we overlay our snow on the top. And so here's our final result. Down here at a low elevation, you can see that I'm getting dirt and grass. And where the angle becomes steep enough, I'm getting this nice cliff material. But then at a high elevation, I'm blending between that moist stone material and the cliff, and I also have the snow applied. So pretty neat. So the last thing that we're going to do in this video is hit play and take our landscape for a spin. So here you can see I've got my mannequin character where the slope is just slightly elevated. You can see that I get dirt, but where it's flat, I get nice grass. And then over here, you can see that I've got this steep cliff face, and so I'm getting the cliff material. And then further up in elevation, if I take a look off in the horizon, I can see that I've got snow on top of the mountains. Wow, so this is pretty neat. I haven't had to hand paint anything, but I've used the height information from both my materials and the elevation of my terrain to automatically apply textures to my landscape. Now there is one more thing, and that is it's possible that after doing this, you would want to go back in and paint specific places where you wanted cliff to show up. Like, let's say that you wanted cliff to show up where it was flat, or you needed grass to be absolutely solid in one spot without blending, or something like that. Basically, you want to override what this material is doing. That's what we're going to talk about next week. So be sure to come back for that tutorial. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about how this material works, or if I can help you sort some things out or improve your own materials, please let me know down in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next week.